Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. This is Without Fear with me, your host, Rakia Carmona. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about codependency, and I have another guest who will be joining to help me just discuss what codependency is and give a different perspective on codependency. But if this is your first time joining, my name is Rakia Carmona. I'm your host, and the purpose of this podcast is to share with you everything that I'm learning about life. And with the perspectives that I'm giving, the point is to learn how to live your life without the element of fear. It's a beautiful way to live. So don't forget, whatever platform you are consuming this podcast on, please like it, subscribe. We put out content very frequently. And yeah, let's jump right into it. So I like to start off defining the key word or the topic that we are discussing. And today is codependency. And what I do is I just go to Google, type in that keyword and look up the definition. And so the definition of codependency is the excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. This is interesting too. As I continue to look it up and I see what is codependent behavior. It says codependency is a behavioral condition in a relationship where one person enables another person's addiction, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement. That's really interesting to me because I always thought that codependency was really just kind of relying on a person for something that you should normally rely on yourself for. And so just looking a little bit deeper into it, looking at the signs of a codependent person. It says here that a codependent person has difficulty making decisions in a relationship. They have difficulty identifying their feelings. They have difficulty communicating in a relationship. They value the approval of others more than their own, or valuing themselves, and they lack trust in themselves or have really poor self-esteem. And the thing about codependency is many people show signs of this kind of behavior. And the person that I want to really have a discussion with today is my near and dear to my heart, the person, the love, my flame. My very own. You've met him before during the marriage series, but my husband, he's going to come in and we're going to just have a quick discussion on codependency, kind of look at the different perspectives of what it is, how it affects relationships, especially marriages and friendships, and what are some ways to overcome that codependency as well. So without further ado, I would love to introduce to you my husband, Papo Carmona.
Hello.
Hey, baby.
Thank you for having me back.
How you doing today?
I'm feeling pretty good, baby. I'm doing well.
You're looking good, too.
Thank you. I could say the same.
So you ready to have this talk about codependency?
I am. It's an interesting topic. I am.
Right. Well, let's hop right into it. So, Papa, what comes to mind for you when you hear codependency?
Well, like without thinking about it, the first thing that came to my mind was the same thing that probably comes to everybody's mind. Like codependency is, being someone that's addicted. You're covering their problems. Enabler. That's what I think. I think of the enabler part.
Wow. That's really interesting because I didn't have that viewpoint on codependency. For me, I guess I thought a codependent person is someone who is just like, they feel like all of their value, all of their worth, their whole identity.
Low self-esteem.
Yeah, like that low self-esteem
part. They suffer from low self-esteem. I thought the same thing, but I think, too, they're enablers in a sense.
What do you mean?
I mean, like, a codependent is, like, you'll go out of your way to cover your partner's, like, I always think of partners, right? Like, in terms of marriage or a couple, and I think a codependent is someone that's in my mind, it's always, without thinking about it, it's always been like an enabler to an addict.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
you'll cover all their tracks because their image is more important than your esteem, or you know. It's kind of hard to explain, I guess. But that's without thinking about it. Like,
I guess for me, I would
me.
have saw the codependent person in that relationship as the addict, and the person who's with someone who's kind of allowing them to continue harming themselves or continue in those behaviors, I saw the enabler. So it's really interesting to me to see, you know, when actually looking up the word. That's why I like to look up words, because you really get a different perspective on things. But it's interesting to know that the enabler also is the codependent person there.
And so, that's the one I thought of as opposed to the one you thought of. That's crazy because they're both correct. Looking through the definition, they're both correct.
They are both correct, but they both are included. You know what I mean? So if I felt that way, I'm sure there's a lot of people who either felt the way your first thoughts were or mine, and it's interesting to see that it's actually all of that.
Probably depends on experience, the perspective they're looking at it from.
Yeah, true. I really want to take some time to kind of look at the enabler side of codependency first. And just sitting here, you could really, I'm able to make the connection, because if you're enabling, anyone that I've ever quote unquote labeled, you know, I'm putting on my little finger quotes, labeled as an enabler, they are always someone who they have an issue with something that's going on in a relationship or in their situation. They have complaints about it.
But they take the burden of camouflage, hiding it, or protecting it.
Right. They don't
from everybody else.
Right.
And thus becoming an enabler.
And thus becoming an enabler.
And a codependent.
So I can see how that would be codependent behavior, because think about in, say, a relationship with someone, and they could be involving in some kind of self-destructive behavior. You know, we'll call it addiction.
Drugs,
yeah,
right.
let's call it addiction.
Self-destruction, whatever.
And this person, although they don't like the behavior, although they have complaints and issues,
with it, right.
they don't agree.
They continue to harbor it.
But they do continue to harbor and protect it, or they stay in that situation and continue to complain about it. So how do you think that makes them codependent on the other person?
They validate, they give them reason. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's like they give them reason or purpose where they feel like they don't have none, because they themselves are too, you know, suffering from low self-esteem. It gives them a sense of importance to do what they're doing for that person.
That's true. They identify with their relationship with that person. You know,
it gives them value.
It gives them a personal value. Right. Yeah, that's what I was heading towards. Just, you know, maybe being out of that situation, they feel like they're losing a part of themselves or a part of their value. And so they feel that it's necessary to remain in this obviously toxic or something that they don't want for themselves, but because they're afraid of losing that value. And so that's really just another element of that fear that we talk about.
That, you know, what that reminds me of is like Stockholm syndrome. This person that has the addiction or has the problem, you know, it basically manipulates the other person, knowing that they're codependent. They manipulate them into, you know, staying, protecting, you know.
And the enabler feels like
when they're a captive to this person, basically, they feel a sense of, you know, I have to be here, or I have to help this person.
But is an enabler really captive though? I can think about a specific situation with someone in our family who you and I both felt like they were an enabler. And although there were a lot of complaints, a lot of issues with the situation, there was really nothing preventing the person from getting out of the situation except what I speculate to be a fear of being alone. And so Is Stockholm really a good one to put on? Because, Stockholm's is where you feel a love and an affection and an attachment to your captor.
Well, think about what we're talking about. This person's definitely a manipulator, right? The person that is holding the codependent because they know they have low self-esteem or have, this fear to lose this other person or something in that relationship. They have this fear. They could have suffered another trauma before, and then that experience led them to, I got to hold on stronger. I got to, protect this person longer. And that's to me, that's what we're talking about. Like, it's that person, tries to satisfy the need of another who is often controlling or manipulating.
Man, that's a good look at it.
And if that's not a captive, if that's not a captive of yours, being that, that manipulator, or if that's not a captive you have, that codependent, I don't know what is.
So I guess the same can also be said, it's the same kind of thought process when you're thinking about if you move from, what I thought as the enabler toward what you thought is like the person with the addiction, the person who has that self-destructive behavior that they continue doing. So when you're looking at someone, let's say someone who is addicted to drugs and they are constantly involving themselves or consuming a substance that is harming them.
And then the person covering for them.
Well, no, I don't want to talk about the enabler. I want to talk about the actual addict now.
Oh, the actual, right, the manipulator.
So on the other end of the codependency spectrum, the person who is, I personally don't think that they're always a manipulator. I think that that's kind of a generalization that cannot be made for everyone, because all codependent people aren't manipulating people.
Right. They may have an addictive or emotionally unstable personality. Right. They, it could be anything.
Right. So what is the cause you think of, so for the person who's addicted? For me, I feel that on that end, there's an escape from, say, the substance or the behavior or the feeling that they get from what it is that they're doing, even if it is not serving them positively. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's where that codependency comes in. So take drugs, for example. A person who's constantly taking heavy drugs, I feel like it's the escape that they're dependent upon. Yeah. And the person who is maybe self-sabotaging, I think that is fulfilling that low self-esteem. You don't feel like you deserve or are worthy of a certain success or happiness or whatever it is. And I haven't really looked at it from that angle, but now looking at the definition, it does make a little bit more sense with that codependent behavior. What you think?
It does, definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
It definitely does. I've known addicts, so yeah, they're running from something, that, and then a lot of them have addictive personalities to begin with, without the drugs.
I've heard you say that before. Yeah. Like a lot of people have addictive personalities, and people think that the word addiction can only be applied to drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, but it can be applied to, financial stuff. It can be applied to angry stuff. It can be applied to, hurtful stuff. It can be applied to all, emotional, anything. You could have an addiction to anger, an addiction to destruction,
Wow.
To hurt, self-hurt.
Yeah.
You can have an addiction to all type of stuff.
Man, that's strong, baby. That's powerful stuff. I think we have great definitions of the key word, which is codependency. What are some things that you think people can do to help with identifying if there's codependency in their relationship? Because the majority of people, think about anyone you've ever labeled as an enabler. They don't see themselves
as the enabler,
as an enabler, or they don't see the problem with the addiction. Yeah, you know. Yeah. So first, I think one good way of identifying codependency in your relationship is really figuring out what codependency looks like to you. Because we all have them. We all have those codependent behaviors, and knowing is like that first step of being able to prevent yourself from exhibiting those behaviors. So what do you think are some ways that a person can recognize if they're being codependent?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
How would you go about recognizing your own condition?
Well, first, I think people need to figure out where, like, their thought processes are coming from. So, say if you're supporting someone who
Drug addict, for example,
you're constantly
right.
having complaints about their behaviors, or you're not happy in a relationship, but you're continuing to support and allow that behavior, maybe asking yourself, well, why? Or what is my reason for allowing this that I don't enjoy, that I don't feel like is serving me positively?
I know you've heard this before, but I'd love to quote this, legal terminology that
Yes,
there's a maximum of jurisprudence, right? To find the guilty party, you find who it benefits. Oh. So if you're the enabler, and you see that everything benefits your partner or this person you're trying to protect and camouflage or hide, everything is benefiting this person. Where do you get your benefit from out of this relationship? I think that would be a good way to identify a codependency.
If you don't feel like you're getting anything out of it,
Right.
but you're constantly
but hardship and freaking stress.
Oh, man, that's a good viewpoint on it. That's really good. I like that. Definitely, if you're in a relationship, whether it be a marriage, a friendship, anything, and you don't feel like it's serving you,
right,
and it's just bringing you grief, it's just bringing you discontent, that may be a sure sign
that you are
of
codependent.
some codependent behavior. Man, good point,
Well,
man.
give me some on that.
Give me some. So, trying to discuss how you can see signs of codependency in a relationship, actually, I felt like just looking up real quick, what are some signs of it?
5 warning signs.
And I got some quick ones here just off Google. Y'all know I look everything up right on Google. And the first could be that, the person that you're in a relationship with or the other person makes you feel guilty for everything. And that goes back to that manipulation standpoint on what you were talking about in the beginning.
Trips.
Yeah, the guilt trips. People forcing their insecurities on you is another one. Making you doubt yourself. This is a huge one. People making you responsible for their emotions, and making you believe that your wants have to be the same as their wants. And that
you
goes
and I discussed that in length when we were doing our reconciliation.
Yeah. So, those codependent signs are there. And definitely, I really feel like you can, if you just in general don't feel good in whatever kind of relationship you're in with someone else, it's probably worth a sit down and looking in the mirror and kind of asking yourself, if I am so discontent with this relationship, why am I here?
Yep.
Why am I here? And here doesn't mean just marriage. I'm talking friendship,
anything.
family, co-workers, any of that. If it's not bringing you any kind of joy, what would be the point? And those are really good warning signs. Yeah. And I take back what I said earlier. It does look like manipulation is a really large
big part of it.
Of codependency, because the codependent person can be manipulated a lot, and they suffer a lot.
They make you feel like you want what they want.
Yeah.
Or you're not with them.
Yeah.
That's one of the warning signs.
That's true. And then that person gives of themselves or changes or puts their desires on the back burner to really appeal and appease this one person to get their approval.
Yeah.
And completely neglects their own needs. So, awesome. Hey, that's interesting. That's why I love looking stuff up.
Yeah.
So, can you be codependent and in love?
Oof. I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I doubt it.
I'm gonna say I agree with you. I really don't think that you can be codependent on a person and also be experiencing love in the relationship, because just by definition, what we've been talking about this whole time, when you're codependent, you're essentially neglecting your own wants and needs for someone else's.
Yeah.
And
drastically doing it.
Drastically, yeah, to the point where you're discontent. And you know what my philosophy is just in relationships in general. It is so important.
Self-love.
You gotta love yourself. You gotta love yourself. And it's important in relationships that you maintain your individuality. And I say it a lot. I tell people a lot, your highest duty is to yourself. You got to love yourself first, this, that, and the other. And I think that people feel like in putting yourself first, you must now neglect another person. And I must admit, there is a fine balance there to find when you're in a really long-term, committed, serious relationship. You need to find the balance between self-love and sharing, and not really narcissism, but just being completely self-absorbed and beyond to where you're not caring for those around you. But I feel like for a relationship, you can't have that codependency and love
at all.
You can't do it.
I have to agree with that. I can't see it. And you taught me that, so you know I definitely agree with that. You taught me the self-love aspect of it. And definitely, I have to disagree with that. I don't think a person can be in love and codependent.
Yeah. I think a true sign of love and a healthy relationship is two people. And person A is an individual with their own desires, wants, and needs that are being nurtured and taken care of. Is a whole person by themselves. And so is person B. And from like my idea of a healthy relationship is those people taking all the things that are great and fantastic about themselves and sharing it with one another. And I
embracing it in the other.
Yeah, and embracing the things from the other person. But we talked about this the other night, in bed during our little pillow talk, where people really, they just look to find their value
in another person
from the other person. And we're taught that.
Validation.
We are taught that. Think about, girls. We were talking about this. Girls, our end game, the concept that we're taught from our mothers, and I'm sorry, maybe in this day and age, the mothers that are alive and raising children now may be teaching something a little different. But when I was coming up, every mom taught every girl, your goal is to find a man. That was the value, finding a husband. You find a husband to marry you, then you're made an honest woman. You know what I mean?
Even guys on the other end of the spectrum were taught the same thing, make an honest woman of her. Like as far as dealing with girls, making an honest woman of her. Just that saying alone, it freaking reeks of codependency.
It really reeks of it.
It reeks of codependency.
It does. That's factual. Like I think that people need to understand, find out who you are. And when you know who you are and you bring that into a relationship,
someone else will embrace it.
Yeah.
As an individual. They'll celebrate it.
Yeah. And when you embrace yourself to a certain degree and you are in a relationship with someone who's trying to manipulate you or trying to invade your mind, so to speak, it's just you're able to see those warning signs more clearly and you're able to stand on your own, and really protect yourself and know, hey, this doesn't serve me the way that I want to be served. I'm getting out of here, And I think that's really what codependent people are still working on, still need to develop, still need to grow. I don't want to say they lack it, because everyone has the potential to be able to know who they are, build a better relationship with themselves, and bring that into whatever relationship they're in. So, in continuing to look up this keyword, we have come across one really, really important word that seems to be like one of the primary identifying factors of codependency. Yeah.
And like the definition I got here that I just looked up is a psychological condition or a relationship in which a person is controlled or manipulated by another who is affected. I find that interesting. Affected with a pathological condition such as an addiction to alcohol or heroin.
Now, I want to look at that control word because we know people who have been in relationships, and a lot of people try to control other people. That's a really big symptom of just our society at large. If you look at, say, the media, the fear tactics that are used to just to control what you buy with your money, the control
how
is
you vote.
How you vote. Everything is is predicated on fear.
And control.
And that fear is used to control you and your thoughts and your actions. So how do you get out of a codependent or controlling relationship or situation?
You know, I'm an athlete. I run.
Well, run is definitely the number one advice. Run.
But on a serious note, how do you get out? You know, you get help, I think. Yeah. You know, that's my biggest thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you go get help. Mm-hmm. If you can identify it on your own, it's big. But if you can identify it on your own and don't know how to solve it, I think you go get help. And you start listening to people. You have friends. You talk to people that could identify a codependency situation, you know, and you talk to them. And then you listen to advice given, you know, or you get help.
Interesting.
That would be
I'm looking up right now, just listening to you, how to stop codependent behavior. And first thing that comes up is start being honest with yourself and with your partner. And that really ties back into that first part of the definition where people have an issue expressing how they feel to their partner. Now, that codependent person can express how they feel to everyone else, but it's rare that they're going to their partner and expressing their true feelings.
Because their partner is usually the one that's
right
controlling or manipulating.
You know, consider counseling. That's definitely one that's up here, which goes right on what you're saying, relying on peer support and establishing boundaries. So the first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself. How are you feeling? What do you want? And is this relationship giving that to you? Go get some help. Talk to a counselor. And, you know, really, I have to touch on this one, which is that stop thinking negatively, because for you to allow something in your life that does not serve you, that's something within
you beating yourself up,
right? That's something within yourself that you need to work on.
You feel like you deserve it at that point.
That was part of what I read up there. You feel like what your partner is doing, you deserve it,
right? Or you don't deserve better than it. This is the best I can do.
Those feelings of unworthiness, man.
He's so handsome.
They take us low.
He's so handsome.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. They feel like they can't do better, or they deserve what they're getting, or, you know, they're unworthy. A lot of people feel like when they're in a codependent relationship that manipulative or controlling person, they sometimes feel like that person is like doing them a favor. Just being with them. Yeah. And that's some negative thinking, that if you really know yourself and know... Okay. If you really know yourself.
I work and people want to talk.
If you really, we turn our phones off in the studio.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
yes,
in the studio, sir. But if you really know yourself and you know your value, you know what you want in life, then you know you don't deserve that.
Right.
Well, I feel like we've had a really great discussion so far just on codependency and really taking a dive and a look into it. I do intend to have a little bit more discussion with more input from other people that we know on the topic. But any closing remarks or additional ideas as far as codependency is concerned before we...
No, I really think we covered it pretty well here. I initially didn't come into this thinking like we would get this involved with codependency. So I really think it's a thorough covering of it, and educational too. I learned a lot. Like
I did too.
I didn't know the term first, emerged in the clinical sense in 1979. So I learned a lot here today. Learned a lot here today, so I appreciate that. And I had a blast.
Well,
so thank you for having me again. And
oh, the pleasure is all mine.
You stay fine. You hear me?
Sir. You can't be making me blush on my own podcast. Okay?
I apologize, ma'am.
But as usual, thank you so much for coming and being part of this podcast and giving your perspective. You always give a point of view that is unique and very well thought out and thorough, and it's just always a pleasure. I can't wait to see you here again on Without Fear.
I hope to be invited often. I really enjoy doing this with you.
Thank you. Mwah. Thank you so much for checking out this podcast on codependency. I can't wait to get some more viewpoints from other people that I know who have great perspectives as well. So there will be more on this topic. I hope you enjoyed my husband, Papo, and his perspective. And I look forward to spending a little bit of time with you next go round. So again, whatever platform you're on, thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye.